I think that's so true, Mario, because again, if whoever listen to this, labels can become limits. And we live in a world full of labels, right? To
Yeah.
again, where maybe even for you, because again, at one point you were just known as a hooper, so someone might label you. It's just Mario, the basketball player, right? And so I think we have to be careful because once we fall into the limitation of just following the labels that people placed on us, sometimes we listen more to the labels of people rather than the calling of God. So there's a difference between a calling and a label. So sometimes people live their whole life not living to their fullest God-given potential because they have spent their most of their lives a slave to the labels that people gave them. Not that all labels are bad, but like you said, Mario, that labels can become limitations, even good ones. Like I said, being known as a basketball player is not a bad label. But let's just imagine if you never broke that label, we would never be having this podcast, or you would never even think of going into film producing, or you would never think of going in to be a lawyer, right? Because you'd spend so much time into, okay, I've been labeled as a hooper, and I'm gonna only try hooping, or anything that I do is going to be within the context of basketball. But now that you have branched out, and I believe that you're going to do a lot of those things that you have in mind because you're not just labeled to limits, but I've got passions, I've got dreams, I've got things that I want to do, and that's
Not
exciting. So yeah,
definitely.
labels they can be
Definitely,
limits.
man.
Yeah,
It's the same thing with opportunities. Like when you get an opportunity and
yeah,
you're kind of hesitant to go with it, you should go with it. Like because even though it might not work out for you, it can bring you closer to what you're really destined for. You know what I mean? And
for
you
sure.
know
100%.
that's just how life is, and we just gotta take it from that point. I want to get into the
100%.
next question. You talked about God calling us and calling us what to do what we're meant to do, right? But we all know that God has given us a calling, right? And I know many people out there that want to go for things within their talents, but they may think that I don't want to go for something because I don't want to look stupid, or I wasn't meant to do that specific thing. But that person might also don't want to short themselves as well. How do you balance that out of, going for something that you think that that's kind of far fetched, but I also don't want to just like, sit down and not do anything and short my.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't. I think it's a great question. I think that in everything there is, especially even with the things that God has called us to do, right? Well, because here's the thing: is everyone, and even believer or not, everyone is designed with this universal purpose, right? Is that we are called to to love God and to love people. We are called to know God and to make him known to others. Now, here's where it's different because, again, God has equipped everyone with different skills, different gifts, and different talents, right? So, the universal purpose for everyone, right, is we are called to know God and make him known. We're called to love God and to love others, right? And now, again, but the way that looks different is because with the talents and the skills and the gifts that God gives everybody, that will look a little different. And so tying it back into your question is even with the things that God has called us to do, there is always some element of a risk. Here's my thing. It may be a personal thing, is that I would rather try and at least know than not try and never know. Again, that might not be the
Facts.
most like deep answer. I think the torture of not trying and not knowing would kill me more than to try and fail. I think I think we have a negative connotation because really the term that you use, short yourself, it's really just another term for failure. And we are living in a culture that is hyper aware and hypersensitive and fearful of failure. And to be honest, I'll be honest on this podcast and let you know that sometimes I wrestle with that. And I'm like, man, if I start this, what if I fail or what if I look bad? But I do believe that there is power in failing because when you fail, you can actually fail forward to a point where is it a failure or is it just a lesson that we've learned? I think sometimes we're very quick to throw out the word failure because something didn't work out. And I think just because something doesn't work out, it doesn't mean you necessarily failed. I think, to me, I think someone who doesn't even try, to me, that registers more as a failure rather than trying. And at least you went for it. At least you took a risk and at least you took the jump. I think that's way better than just sitting back. To me, if you didn't even try, to me, that's more of a failure. Where at least if you try and it doesn't work out, from my perspective, at least you figured out one way not to do it. And then if you feel it, you go back and you try again. And if you feel the pull from God, you keep going until the door happens or until the door opens. I think sometimes when we get the vision from God and we know what our assignment is, and we think that just because we know our assignment and our purpose from God, we think that everything is going to be smooth sailing. We think that everything is going to be open doors right away. Sometimes it takes a few closed doors to finally get that one open door. It's like, God, this is it. And so I think sometimes we have a very romanticized view of what it looks like to walk out our God-given purpose. And we think just because God is in it, that means there won't be any challenges or any struggles or even a risk. There are things that can only happen on the other side of a risk. There are some things that God wants us to do, but he has purposely designed for us to risk something just to see how desperate we are to walk out the very thing that God has called us to walk out. Sometimes, man, I don't know, just desperate people are willing to take a risk. If you're desperate, you'll make the jump. If you're desperate enough, you'll try. And so now again, here's what I'm not advocating for. I'm not advocating, to be dumb. I'm not, to go out, but use wisdom, use discernment, all of that. But man, sometimes you gotta go for it. And that's for me too, because sometimes I'm like, what if I fail? What if I do? What if I look bad? And I can't afford to live my life like that, especially not a year like